Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Monica Cruz, and I serve as the State Data Center Lead for the Texas Demographic Center. And we're really happy to see you here this morning to join in on our Population Estimates webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to announce that this webinar is being recorded, so if by any chance you prefer not to participate, you may exit this session and know that this recording will be available via our YouTube channel and on our website. So before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about who we are, if those of you who are joining us here for the first time. We are the Texas Demographic Center. We are headed and led by the state demographer, Dr. Lloyd Potter. We are affiliated with the University of Texas at San Antonio under the Institute for Demographic and Socioeconomic Research. One of the major functions of our center is to produce annual population estimates and biennial population projections. We provide numerous other services where we disseminate demographic and socioeconomic information, publications, presentations. We do presentations all across the state. We put together and host an annual conference every May, so be watching out for that. We hope you can join us there in Austin. And we do various webinars, social media posts, and a monthly newsletter. We also provide training and technical expertise and custom data analysis. And we are an important role, and we are closely affiliated with the U.S. Census Bureau and what we call the Texas Demographic Center affiliates, or statewide network of different affiliates across the state. An important part of our role is to work closely with state and local governmental units, as well as other state networks, to support their work in the delivery of services in communities throughout Texas. And the foundation of this is the use of good quality demographic data. So today, two members of our population estimates team will share information about our data collection process and methodology. We'll have time for question and answers, but also feel free to send your questions via the chat, and we'll make sure to address them after our presentations. You'll also have the opportunity to participate in a quick 3-question survey at the end to tell us how we did and how we can better serve you. So our first speaker is Valeria Alvarez, our research scientist associate, who will provide an overview of the data sources and timelines we use to prepare our population estimates. So I'll turn it over to Valeria.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and I'm glad you were all able to join us. So, like Dr. Cruz mentioned, I am going to be talking about our data collection process and the timeline that we work on as we produce our annual population estimates. So, like we mentioned before, I wanted to start off by providing a little bit more context into who we are and what we do here at the Texas Demographic Center. So the Texas Population Estimates and Projections Program is housed within the Texas Demographic Center, and we are mandated by the state to produce population estimates and projections. And we produce population estimates annually for the state and all counties and places in Texas. And then every other year, we produce population projections for the state and all counties. To provide a bit more context for our timeline on the next slide, I did want to briefly mention that the Texas Population Estimates and Projections Program sends out 5 annual surveys to Texas counties, cities, and educational institutions. And these surveys are our higher education survey, our private school enrollment survey, our annexation and boundary survey, our survey of new residential units in unincorporated areas, and our survey of new residential units in incorporated places. And I will go a little bit more into detail about each survey later on, but for now, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the different surveys that we send out annually. So on this slide here, you can take a look at our typical timeline that we use for the production of our population estimates. There is a lot going on here, so I did want to mention that our slides will be made available after the webinar in case you are wanting to take a deeper look at our timeline later on. Our data collection period spans the entire year, with our survey cycle beginning in October with our higher education survey, and it officially concludes at the end of May. Throughout the rest of the year, we are also intermittently collecting other necessary data from outside sources, so our data collection is a constantly ongoing process. Next in the timeline comes the production and review of the group quarters populations. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, group quarters are a bit different from typical household living arrangements. Instead, they're places where groups of people who are not necessarily related to each other reside closely together. So think more like college dorms or nursing facilities. And because group quarter facilities are an important component of the overall population, we wanted to make sure that we include these populations in our estimates. Next, we move on to the production and internal review of our county and place population estimates. We use the data we have collected throughout the year to start producing our population estimates. And we try to begin our internal review of our county population estimates by July. And once we complete that internal review, we can move on to the review of our place population estimates. And by mid-September, we are ready to publish our preliminary population estimates on our website so that we can seek outside feedback on our estimates. We typically allow 2 to 3 weeks for the feedback period. And just as a quick note, during this year's comment period, we did receive feedback from 22 cities and counties, 10 of whom provided us with additional information so that we could take a second look at their estimates, and 12 of whom wrote back to say that they were satisfied with our estimates that we had produced. And Dr. Yu will speak a little bit more about our comment period later on in the presentation. And then lastly, after we've received all these comments and have been able to take a look at them and work them into our estimates, we are able to finalize our population estimates and upload them to our website for everyone to use at the start of November. Next, I will provide an overview of our data collection process. So we collect data through 3 different ways. One is through our own surveys. Next is by collecting administrative data from other sources. And lastly is by gathering publicly available data. And I will go a little bit more into depth for each. So the first 2 surveys, which I have displayed here, are our higher education survey and our private school enrollment survey. Our higher education survey collects enrollment totals and the number of students living on campus from private and public higher education institutions across the state. And this survey helps us collect the critical information on populations living in group quarters, which I mentioned before. And our private school enrollment survey on the right collects enrollment totals for students in grades 1 through 8, and then we use this data to estimate the change in the school age population. Next, we have our annexation and boundary survey on the left, which collects information related to boundary changes that may affect the population in incorporated places. And the survey helps us account for the movement of people across city boundaries as a result of annexations or other boundary changes that may occur. On the right, we have our survey of new residential units in unincorporated areas, which collects information from counties concerning new residential housing units being built in the unincorporated portions of the county. And by unincorporated area, we are referring to those parts of the county that are not governed by a local municipal body. And lastly, we have our survey of new residential units in incorporated places, which collects information from cities concerning the number of new residential housing units being built within their city to help us better account for the growth in their region. For this survey, as well as the last one, we primarily ask about building permits that were issued during the time span that we're looking for. However, we do recognize that not all cities or counties issue building permits, and as a result, we do accept data from other sources, such as sewage permits or utility connections or voter registration data. And even if a city or county does not issue building permits or have access to any other of the data sources that I talked about, we still want you to respond to our surveys and send it back to us. We are interested in receiving responses from everyone we send out our survey to. I did want to note that our responding to our survey is completely voluntary. No one is required to respond. However, responding to our surveys will provide us with valuable information that we can use to better inform our population estimates. So really responding to our surveys helps both us as a TDC and use you as the users of our data, which is why we encourage people to complete our surveys and return them to us. Over the last few years, we have seen a decline in the response rate to our surveys. This graph here shows the response rate to our survey of new residential units in incorporated places. And this response rate includes everyone who has returned the surveys back to us, whether or not they issued building permits or not. And you can see that how the response rate has been trending downwards. And on the next slide, you can see the same downward trend in the response rates to our survey for new residential units in unincorporated areas. And this trend can also be seen in the response rates to our other surveys. This all goes to say that we hope you can help us with increasing our response rate by responding to our surveys by our online submission form or through email or mail, so that we can continue to produce well-informed and high-quality population estimates and projections. Next, I will talk a little bit more about administrative data that we collect. So we do collect various data from outside sources that helps us with producing our estimates. And here on the slide, I have included some of the other data we collect and the sources we collect them from. And as you can see, we collect data from national sources, such as the US Census Bureau, as well as other state agencies, such as the Texas DMV and the Texas Educational Agency. And then we gather all this information, reach out to them, gather the information, and prepare it for the population estimates when we produce them. And lastly, we have data that is publicly available. And this includes decennial census data, American Community Survey data, and the Census Bureau's own population estimates, which differ from ours. And after we have gathered all this data, we are able to begin the process of producing our population estimates, which Dr. Yu will discuss more about. And we will, like Monica mentioned before, we'll take questions at the end, but you're welcome to drop any questions you may currently have in the chat if you want to. And then I will go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Yu.
Thank you, Valeria. So I'll continue to talk about, like Valeria pointed out, once we collect the data, how we process the data to produce our population estimate. And then I'll end by talking about information that users may want to know about this round of the population estimates. So first of all, before I go to talk about the processing of the data, why do we collect so many data? You've seen the amount of data we've collected. Why do we do that? First reason is all these data are highly correlated with the population data. So they're very good to be used to predict or estimate population. To give you some examples, this is a table where I show their relationship. So the first column is where I calculate the state ratios of enrollment to population. So basically, if you look at vehicle registration, 0.862 basically means of every 100 people, about 86 of them registered, is for the vehicle. And so the left column also displayed two time in points, the 2010 census and 2020 census. If you look at across time, the ratio or the relationship between all these enrollment data and population stays pretty stable across time. So that's one indication why they're good indicators across time. Right-hand column is where I calculated these ratios at the county level, but then I did a correlation among all the counties. You can see, 9 and 9.3, they're very highly correlated. So remember, when we talk about correlation, it ranges from 0 to 1. So 1 means completely correlated. So we're very close to there when you see the 0.999 over there. And again, over time, this relationship is these relationships are pretty stable. And that's why these data that we collected are very good to be used in our population estimates. There are other reasons, of course. These data are available across the state. They're consistent across the state because we usually get them from state overseeing agencies. And they're comparable across years. They're published consistently, provided regularly on the website now by different government agencies. And of course, we also use it because they are used in very well-established methods for population estimates. And specifically, I'm talking about the 3 estimates where we used in our estimates: the component method 2, housing unit, and racial correlation. Today, since we're talking about estimates, I will probably go to a little bit detail about our different methods. First one, so this is what we call component method, where we start with population, where the population 2022, P plus K, basically on the left-hand side. So population 2022 equals the base population, in which we use the 2020 population as the base, population T, plus natural increase, which is births minus deaths that happened between 2020 and 2022. And then plus net migration or net migrants, be it negative or positive. And this is calculated or considered or calculated by taking out migration from in-migration. So this is the simplest formula we see in all the methods, although they may not be the easiest to make. So natural increase is relatively easy. We have very good vital statistics data in Texas. So that takes care of the birth and death data. The hardest one is the net migrants. In this particular method, we use school enrollment, or more specifically, school enrollment of grades 1st to 8th to try to estimate net migrants. Any differences we see in the school enrollment in proportion to the population is considered or estimated as the net migrants. And that's for population under 64. And for population 65 and over, we look at the differences between Medicare enrollment from year to year and try to estimate migration in that way. So for age 65 and over. The second method we use is probably pretty well known and used by lots of local governments too, which is called housing unit. This is where we take use of the housing unit, because housing units have a very close relationship with population. Any person needs a place to live, right? So, so in this particular method, again, population 2022, T plus K, equals population T, which is population 2020, plus all the new housing units times the household size. And to calculate the newly added housing units, we use the new housing units minus the demolished housing units times the occupancy rates to get that. So pretty straightforward for this method. And to use this method to estimate, we utilize building permit data that Valeria mentioned that we collect, and also annexation and boundary data. The last one is called racial correlation. This is the only method we used where we use a model, a regression model, to estimate our population. The formula looks, pretty complicated, but it's actually not as complicated as it seems. So basically, we use a bunch of what we call symptomatic indicators. The indicators you have seen earlier, birth, death, voter registration, vehicle registration, housing unit, they are highly correlated with the population. Instead of using them separately, we put them in a model and try to predict population. And this particular one we're using, instead of directly predicting population, we use the ratio to predict that. Basically, we use the ratio of 2022 to 2020 to predict the population 2022 to population 20. And then after that, then you will be able to get population 2022 from the 2020. So this is very simple in a nutshell method. If you want to learn more, you can read the methodology we put online. You can also call us and we can set up a meeting or have a chat on the phone if you want to know more details there. And so after talking about all these are used to estimate what we call the resident population. So if you work at a place and reside somewhere else, you're not counted in this place. You're counted where you reside or estimated where you reside. And there's also another component here, which is the group quota population. I have already seen in the chat a question about the group quota. So prison population, nursing home population, and student dorms are considered group quota. They're estimated separately. Basically, we get data from, again, the overseeing agencies, population data in each prison, and then use their addresses to put them into the places and counties we estimate. So these are for our county population estimates. For place, once we have our county population, we use only one method, the housing unit method, to allocate the county population to what we call park places. Many of you know that, and by places here, I actually mean that's how it's termed in the census. So by place, I refer to cities and towns in Texas. So there's this concept of park place where, because we know that lots of places are located in multiple counties. And the 2020 census or any descending census actually do provide count of the place by county. So each county city combination is called we call park places. So when we allocate to the park places, and then we add the places together to get the whole place estimate. So that's how we get our place estimates. And then we also have another line of product. For the county estimates, we also break them down by age, race, and sex. And usually the way we do it is, this is a little bit different from our projected population method. Once we have the total estimated population, we then allocate the total population to a projected population. So we project from 2020, use our birth and death data to survive and add population, and then get to the 22 distribution of the county population, and then we allocated the total to these age, race, sex combination. So one thing I really want the users to know, and we will talk a little bit more here, is usually we use the 2020 or we use the descending census as the base for the distribution, for the age, race, sex distribution. But this time around, we use, be very careful here, we use the vintage 2018 PDC projected 2020 distribution. And I will talk a little bit more later why we did that. But this is how a very quick comparison of how we compare with the newly released this the decennial census age structure, age sex structure was only released a few months ago. So the lines on, the blue lines, the red lines on each side are the decennial census. And the bars in the center are our PDC projected age distribution. So left-hand side, the y-axis is the age, each age group, and then each bar represents the population of each age cohort. And so this is how we compare, and left-hand side is male and right-hand side female. If you look at this in general, we're pretty good, in line with the DHC, except that you may see some differences there. First of all, at the bottom, you'll see that we have higher estimates or projections in the bottom there, especially age under 5. And other research has shown actually census 2020 has undercounted the age under 5. And so that's actually one reason we're still looking into this and try to see how to mitigate that in using the decennial census. So basically the pattern is very consistent with what other research has shown about the national population distribution, undercount of age 5, overcount from the census of, if you look at the middle there, of the teenage population. And you probably also noticed that there are dragouts on certain age groups, right there, from the DHC or decennial census, all the lines staking out there. We'll talk about that a little later. So this is basically how what we used for our base for the 2022 estimate. Okay, after we did all this using our methods to do all our calculations, to stabilize the estimates, we actually control our county estimates to the Census Bureau state population estimates, and also the place estimates to the TDC county estimates. By controlling here, I actually mean, so when you when you do your county estimates, for example, you add them up to get a state total. This number usually is different from a state estimate you do, right? And so to make them more consistent, and more importantly, to make it more stabilized, because usually it's concluded in the research field that bigger area estimates are more stable than smaller area. So you then to control to make them the same as the state population, you actually take the difference or take the ratio of your state sum and the state estimates, apply that difference ratio to all the counties, so that you can adjust your county totals to be consistent with your state estimate. So that's how we control our population to different geography, to a higher geography level of totals. So once we've done that, we will do an internal review. This is where we compare the 3 estimates, compare these estimates against other sources, Census Bureau estimates, for example, look at historical trends, and then try to decide on a preliminary estimate before we publish the final estimates. We have, in recent years, added a process here, external review. This is when we send out our preliminary estimates or notification to local governments, give them a chance to look at our preliminary and get feedback from them. So this is a summary, a little summary of all the feedback we've got for the 2022 estimates. So more people agree with our estimates than who have questions, right? So there are people who agree with our estimates, that they don't have objections. And then for the people who kind of questioned our estimates, they either provided new or different data. We have, based on those data, revised our estimates. And then some others question our base data. So this is something that I want to talk about here. So far we've been using the 2020 census total counts as the base. This has been our kind of bottom line, you know, our principle here. The base data, we have to go with a single criteria of the base data. Usually this is where we cannot do much here. The rule of all these estimates is that we'll go by the census counts. So, and that's so far what we have been doing. This may be brought into question in the future. I'll talk a little bit more later. And then some question our fitness of our data and methodology in certain areas. Some say, you know, in our area, demolition does not mean that the house will be demolished. They'll be rebuilt. And some say enrollment data, we don't have schools. How do you and the enrollment data doesn't reflect anything. So things like that that we have received. And here I wanted to say one thing that we have done that may be a little different from local area estimates is we try to find data sources that are consistent across states. Because if you look at our estimates, these county estimates and place estimates are basically trying to allocate. Lots of them are not direct estimates. We're trying to allocate from a state estimate, for example, to the local or sub level. So it's very important for us to stay with this consistent data source and stay with a consistent method. That being said, we do recognize there are differences across different areas. So it's always a balance between trying to use a consistent method versus taking into consideration local information. So how to access our data. So this is our website, you know, and you can see we released our final yesterday. Along with that, we also published an infographic on the natural decline or natural change, sorry, not natural decline, natural change map across Texas by all Texas counties. And then data are available for download. You can see that we have total population by county, total population by place, total population by metropolitan statistic area. For this estimates, we use the 2020 definition of MSA. And we also aggregate the data by Council of Governments. And then lastly, the age, sex, and race for state and for the state and counties. We usually also produce a customizing tool. I think our IT people are still working very diligently on that. It should be coming soon in the next couple of days. And this is where you can choose your place or county, not place, I'm sorry. The customizing tool is only available for the counties. So you can choose your county and the age, race, or sex you want, and then create your own table there. And the link to the website is down there. All right. So these are our estimates, how to access them. Next, I'm going to talk about, many people ask this question over the years to us, the Census Bureau estimates. So the Census Bureau do produce a set of estimates that in terms of content are pretty similar to us. They do have county estimates and place estimates and also demographic details, except that they are by 5-year age interval. So let's talk about this, especially in the context of how they're kind of different from the TDC estimates. So in terms of methodology, they use a single method for the county estimate where the population equals the starting population, 2020, plus or minus natural increase or natural change, plus minus net migration. This is the same formula or similar formula you saw earlier, the component method. Except for net migration, they have very good data. I'll have to say this. They use the text data, where the assumption is if you change the place or residence where you file your data, you have moved. You're living in a different place. So they use that data supplemented with a USPS national address change file, and also Medicare data to estimate their net migration. So that's for the county. And then for place estimates, they use, again, a single housing unit method, but they use that, again, to control to county estimates, or say they use this to allocate the county estimates to the place level. So that's in a nutshell how they produce their estimates. One thing that needs to be, I want to bring your attention to very importantly, after 2020, so I mentioned almost all the estimates you see out there, or most of them, use a method that use similar methods where we start with a base population, and then we try to estimate added population. So, and the majority of researchers out there use the census, decennial census count as the base. This has been the practice for years. This time, however, after 2020, Census Bureau began to use something they call blended base, where they combine the population counts from the 2020 census with their own estimate of the 2020 population. The reason being the census was delayed. So by the time they need the base, some of the information was not available yet. So they have to stick with their timeline. So they created this blended base. So this blended base may be different from the decennial census counts. It's also because in 2020, Census Bureau added a new noises method into their data. So those original counts are actually not available to the public. All we see from the public side are noise injected population. So the Census Bureau team, though, Census Bureau estimates team, though, they have access to the original noise-free data. And so, but before they publish the data out to the public, their base population, they need to then inject more noises to their data. So what you will see is that next year, the base will be different again from the Census Bureau estimate. So just be very careful. The estimates are, the differences are usually very small, especially at the county level and state level. But at the places level, especially small places with small population, the differences can be significant. So pay attention to when you're using the estimates, be sure to look at the base population. And so in terms of release, Census Bureau, while we release everything at the same time, like yesterday, Census Bureau released different products throughout the year, starting from December of the estimates year to June the next year. So the 2020 estimates from the Census Bureau was published at the end of last year, December last year. Then also the other differences is each vintage of the Census Bureau estimates have a new estimate for the previous years. So in the 2020 vintage, they'll have new estimates for the 2021 population, which this is something we have not been doing. In our estimates, it will be, if we release 2020 estimates, it will be 2020 estimates. We have not gone back to redo our estimates. So Census Bureau also, although they don't have a feedback period like we do, they do have a population estimate challenge program. So if you do like to challenge their program, contact us. We'll provide you with the link and to their estimates, their challenge program, and can provide more information on that. So how did we do? And what do you use, right? So at 2020, when the 2020 population count came out, we did a evaluation. We compare our 2020 estimates with the 2020 count. First column is the 2020 census count. Second row, Census Bureau estimates. And then following that, the last three columns are three different methods. These methods are the direct estimates. We have not controlled it to anything. If you look at that, especially if you look at that, all Census Bureau estimates, housing unit, racial correlation methods yielded an estimate less than 1% different from the Census 2020. They performed really well, actually, at the state level. So while Census Bureau overestimate the Texas population by about 0.74%, we underestimate the population using housing unit method by about 0.38%. And so housing unit is the method, the best method so far, if you only look at the raw estimates there. So we did really well, and we are pretty comparable in terms of accuracy to the Census Bureau estimate. This is, of course, the state. We have evaluated the county level, and of course, the table will be more complicated because you need more measures there. And the conclusion is that there are counties that we do better than the Census Bureau and vice versa. So we each have our pros and cons, and some places where we do better than the other. Okay, so that's how well we did. And then there are other Census Bureau estimates that I want to cover. So far, all the estimates is what we call postal census estimates, where we start with census count and estimate the population after that. After every census, Census Bureau also put out or reproduce their estimates for the last decade using both censuses. For example, 2010 and 2020, they re-estimate all the years between 2010 and 2020. And this is called the intercensal estimate. And the purpose of this is that, and for people who want to compare and use a consistent trend line from all the way from 2010 to 2022. Usually by this time, intercensal estimates are available, but unfortunately, because of the delay of census, the intercensal estimates won't come out until next year. So once you have that, you can use that for trend analysis there. So, an American Community Survey, lots of people use this, very widely used, but perhaps not everybody knew that the American Community Survey estimates of population are actually controlled to the Census Bureau population estimates. Since it's a sample survey, it doesn't have count, so it needs to control to something. And what they control to is the Census Bureau population estimate. And place estimate thinks it's only available every 5 years. It's actually controlled to something that can be seen as a 5-year estimate, average estimates. So if you were going to use the Census Bureau estimate, population estimates, use the estimates themselves. That's better than the estimates from the American Community Survey. All right, I guess the important question here. So you both produce estimates. What do we do? As you can see, the two estimates are independent. They're used by different governmental agencies. I guess logically, it makes sense that most federal agencies use the Census Bureau estimates. Some of the state agencies use our estimates or a variation or adjusted kind of estimate from us. So depending on what you're doing, if you're applying for federal grants, you probably do want to use the Census Bureau estimates. And the other things you can consider is consistency. If you have been using ours, continue to do that, and vice versa. And consider the timing of the release. Which one works better for you? Is it, Census Bureau released the estimates earlier. Ours is a little later. And because of that, I also want to mention, and the reason why our timing is like that is by May of every year, that's when we can get the actual data, vehicle registration, building permits, all in by May. So September, October is the fastest we can get the data out. Census Bureau, on the other hand, think about this. If they release 2020 estimates at the end of 2020, there are data that they have to project. They won't have all the data available from 2022. So that's the other thing to consider. Census Bureau and lots of their data, they use a projected kind of data instead of the real data. I'm not saying they're not as good. They're usually pretty good, but that's another difference between our data and another thing to consider. So, and other things that data users need to pay attention. Again, as I mentioned, if you're using total population estimates for counties and places, pay attention to the PACE population. I want to emphasize again, because they may be different. If you look at the publishing base year, they may be different from the decennial census counts, because remember, there's also challenge program, challenge the Census Bureau, census count. And by the way, we have in presentation of the state challenged the group quarter count, which is PCGQR. And this morning, we just received a approval letter from Census Bureau that says some of our challenges were successful. So, and due to that, the base population may change if your challenge is successful. And of course, I mentioned the use of blend base, and that can change your base population. And second thing you need to do is, if you want to look at cross-decade trend analysis, try to use and wait for the Census Bureau to have their intercensal population estimate. If you're using the demographic details of our estimates, pay attention again to the base. Neither Census Bureau or TDC are using the decennial census 2020, the age, sex distribution, or race distribution. We're not using that as the base. We're still using our projected or estimate distribution from the last decade, from our estimates or projections. So you will see a difference in the base in terms of age, race, sex structure than the published decennial census. And the reason being, there were delay in the release of the data, and there are issues in the 2020 census. I won't have time to cover so some of the issues there. The slides will be there for you to look. And so I'm going to conclude by 2 slides. What do local governments do, given all this? We ask you to respond to our surveys so that we can improve our data. You can see we rely heavily on your responses in our estimates. So respond to our surveys, provide feedback to our preliminary estimates. Just so you know, we do listen to you. We do value your estimates. We have made changes based on your feedback. And and throughout the year, you don't have to contact us only two times in the year. Continue to work with us throughout the year to improve our methodology. We can work out, special adjustments for your area. And lastly, I have talked, subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media. And lastly, prepare for the 2020 census. I know it seems far, but based on what I've said, I've emphasized several times the base population. The base population is supposed to be the 2020 census. And because of all the issues we've seen in this 2020 census, and that's where all the delays and some of the issues that have come up. So it's very important for us to have a base population to work on the estimates. So you need to start preparing and provide feedback comments to the Census Bureau so that we can have a better census in the 2030. So what we're going to do, or what do we do, we'll continue to try to produce estimates and projections on time. It has been delayed. We'll try our best to do, but of course, some of this is contingent on the available of the Census Bureau data. And we'll continue to work with local governments, users, and other stakeholders to improve our estimates. We'll hold meetings and webinars based on your feedback to provide more information, and of course, get your feedback. And lastly, we'll serve as the liaison between the Census Bureau and Texas demographic users. If you have a question for the Census Bureau, don't know whom to contact, try us first. Try to ask us if we have a contact there that we can find out information for you. So, and with that, I'm going to conclude and open to questions and transition back to Monica. Right. Going to stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yu. I didn't get a chance to really step in and formally introduce Dr. Helen Yu. Thank you so much. She does serve as our associate director and our senior demographer, and certainly the lead on our population estimates and projections program. So thank you so much for that great explanation. I think we're going to take some questions, Q&A here, just to make sure that we address. Also, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you want to step in. But I do want to go ahead and address the questions that have been posted in the chat. And I do believe the first one, Dr. Yu, is that how are the prisons population calculated? I believe you addressed this a little bit in your presentation. I don't know if you just want to sum that up with that, because the question was, if a prison is annexed into the city limits, how does it affect population for the council district? Inmates cannot vote, so does it change the population for the district?
So once we have the information, the annexation information, the prison will be counted in, the new area, new place or new county, or new place, I guess, mostly, will be counted there. So I mentioned that our estimates are, in Census Bureau too, are residential estimates, regardless of whether you're eligible to vote. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great. So I'm not sure, the next one is from Craig. Can we access the data you collect? And I do believe you addressed like how you can access our estimates program. I'm not sure, Craig, if that, if you have more details about that question, if you wanted to unmute and elaborate. Feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions on that. Our next question comes from Mel. How should we interpret the differences between the TDC population estimates and the Census Bureau's, which I do believe, Dr. Yu briefly addressed? The Census Bureau's file is based on estimates for 2020, while TDC started from the Census 2020's actual population count. Did you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, Dr. Yu?
So as I said, so there are different ways of estimate population, and the differences really are rooted in the different ways of the estimates method. I think the reason why we did produce our own estimates is because as you have seen, we have pretty good data that can help estimate the data. We just want to provide a different source of estimates there. That's one source of differences there, I guess, or the main reason why we're different. And of course, as May pointed out, the Census Bureau used a different base population there, and we have been using the census counts. We want to, we are hearing from people, we are collaborating with other states, and I think now we're in at the stage where everybody's trying to figure out how to move forward, whether in our discussions with other states, we are also considering maybe we'll try to be more consistent and use the census base moving forward. But those are still in the discussion. But we'll let you know in our maybe next webinar if we make a decision on that. So.
Great. Do we have any questions from the audience at this point? Did anybody want to just unmute themselves and ask a question of our panelists?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am the one that asked the question about the annexing the prison into the city. I have been questioned. They seem to think that the prison is already estimated into the city population, but it is not annexed in. How would I find out if that group has been counted into the city's population or not?
So I'd suggest contact us individually, maybe after this meeting, we'll look at our data and then let you know whether that has been counted.
Okay, so. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else in our audience have any other further questions or? thoughts? Well, it sounds like we did a great job kind of helping answer some of these questions. I do want to share on our screen here. Of course, this was Dr. Yu, but I wanted to also just bring up briefly our QR code for a few seconds so that you can scan with your phone. This will give you options to visit our website, join our listserv, subscribe to any of our social media platforms. We do share media posts every Monday of the week that highlight great data points. We call them Biz of the Week. So highlights great data points about Texas demographics. So I do encourage you to, follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter. We're here to provide, the best and most relevant data products for our audience and for our data users. Well, this concludes our webinar on population estimates. Our plan is to host another webinar in the spring on population projections and the program and the work that we do with our population projections program. We want to thank you for joining us, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any of your data needs or questions. And please participate in our 3-question survey before you leave today. We really do value and welcome your feedback. And I think this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great week.